I want to welcome my panel with me as well, Brian Whipple. He's the CEO of Accenture Interactive. Also, Leisa Reichelt, Head of Research and Insight over at Atlassian, and Kate Ryder, CEO of the Maven Clinic. Really good to talk to you guys. We had a pre-call, and something that came out of the pre-call was trying to find out what the new water cooler was. I know it's not a new term, but I think it's a fun way to start because water cooler is fun. Make friends, there's creativity, you can generate ideas, exchange information, and how to recreate that and everything it represents. Leisa, let's start with you. Get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think like everything is happening online these days, right? So we can't rely on anything physical for a water cooler anymore. But I think we need to think about like what benefit did that bring us? And I think that it's really about those collision conversations, those people that we would run into and talk to that we wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to. So I think it's less of a physical location question and it's much more of a facilitated experience now. So I think it's a question for our leadership really to make sure that we're trying to make sure that we're creating these opportunities for new perspectives to be brought into our teams regularly through avoiding the kind of propensity to have smaller, more focused meetings all of the time and always be thinking about like how can we bring in those new perspectives to challenge our teams. So it's really trying to facilitate that experience.
Yeah, let's just go around real quick and just get everyone else's perspective on that, and then we can get back to more specific examples. Kate, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah, I think again, echo that the water cooler conversation is really about those kind of spontaneous conversations. So we've tried to recreate that by, really leveraging some virtual events that we'll put on during the week. So whether it's we have meditation during the week, we'll have virtual cooking at night. We even had a talent show over the summer where people rehearsed, and so I think with some of those
that could have gone really wrong.
I know. Well, let's just say I didn't sing on it, so that's a good one. But anyways, yeah. And so I think by doing a lot of these events, we're hoping that a lot of the spontaneous conversations are happening at least over Slack, Zoom, and we're doing the best we can, but we definitely miss each other.
Brian.
Yeah, I mean, the metaphorical water cooler conversations are, let's face it, just generally not occurring. So it rests on management, as was just said, to create a much more intentional effort around person-to-person communication. And I think that is more important than ever before. And if you have a small or large organization, whether you have 100 people or thousands and thousands of people, there are things you can do, such as something other than the standard Zoom call that can connect. Create that human connection. But I mean, it is not the same, and it is something we're all suffering from a little bit. I mean, the few physical get-togethers I've had with my work family, you see this like gushing of happiness and emotion, which is refreshing in a way. But you want more of it, and we can only get a little bit. So
why don't you guys go around and give some examples? Oh, sorry, Leisa, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say, it's been really interesting, I think, in some of our kind of more traditional meetings that we've had, like our big sort of town hall meetings. One of the really popular things that we've started doing is using the Zoom functionality to create little random side rooms. And that's actually become something that's been a much, much bigger part of the meetings than we've ever done before, because it's like, who's going to randomly turn up in my room? What are we going to talk about? Who am I going to meet? What conversations are going to come from that? And there's a lot of demand, I think, in the teams for those kinds of interactions now.
So then to that point, it'd be great you guys already gave some specific examples, but let's do a little bit more, sort of a project or something that you did to try and help facilitate that community and then sort of the creativity that can come out of that community, what you did and what the result was for it. The most I've ever done is, happy hour with my team, which was great, but it would be great to get different ideas and stuff going on in there as well. Kate, you mentioned a talent show. What else have you guys done?
Well, one thing that we're doing that's pretty cool is we're having virtual donuts. So basically somebody gets paired with, they sign up and then someone gets paired with someone else, and it's just like a 20-minute chat. It could be, cross-functional with different, it's supposed to be cross-functional with different teams, but everyone gets paired up at all levels of the company, and they can just have a chat. I think the other thing that we're doing a lot more intentionally is during our offsites per team or during kind of company meetings, we're trying to do a lot more kind of personal sharing. So, answer quick questions about yourself, tell us about where you grew up, tell us about, your favorite type of music. And so, I think in an office setting, whereas that would come up during potentially a water cooler conversation, we're now very deliberately teasing it out in meetings to just drive that community and connection.
Yeah, I think right now you see firms and companies trying to essentially build culture through technology, which, let's face it, that is hard, but it's not impossible. And you can build elements of it. I mean, we do things like what you just talked about. We have, virtual meetings. We use 3D technologies, virtual technologies such as like Unreal Engine. And in the middle of these meetings, whether they be dance parties or other ways of not doing a traditional video call to allow some sort of, unusual video connection. That is better, for us at least, than the standard, virtual coffee hour, virtual happy hour, that sort of thing. But there is in my belief, a diminishing returns principle to some of this, and hopefully we'll all get past it before we get there. I mean, that's the plan.
I think it's super important, though, to make sure that we're investing time in this and not thinking about it as inefficiency. And that was something that I really learned when I took on a distributed team well before the pandemic ever existed. And it's something that I learned from somebody in our team who had worked with Trello in our organization. They'd always been completely remote. And she was like, you really need to invest time every team meeting in playing together and being social together. And so we would spend like 15 minutes of our precious hour together, like playing a game of virtual Pictionary. And it took me a long time to really kind of get my head around the fact that that was such an important investment in the team, getting to know each other, getting to trust each other, being able to work together more effectively. And I think that can be a big shift, I think, as a manager to kind of get out of that. Okay, we've got to use this time really efficiently. And that means focusing on the agenda items into making sure that we continue to invest in building these connections for people who don't get to be in the same physical space together.
A couple questions on that. I guess, what have you guys noticed the result of all that being? So it definitely seems like you all three have been able to create some kind of work culture remotely, and you keep inventing it and reinventing it. Then what's the payoff? Like, how do you measure that success? Leisa, it's just natural to ask you because you were saying like investing that kind of time. When did you notice that worked?
I think one of the main reasons that you're doing it is you're trying to build trust. Trying to build trust between the people in your team so that fosters a better ability to communicate effectively with each other, and it fosters better team effectiveness. So really what you're looking for is you're looking to create all of these connections and create strong connections so that people are going to share more openly, more frequently, more thoughtfully with each other. And that way you're going to get better insights, better results from the team more quickly, get more from the collective rather than each individual trying to achieve things in their own silos. So I think that for me is super important. And I see that that's succeeding when people in the team are creating their own connections. And so it cycles back to this water cooler idea, right? When people are colliding with each other without me having to always be going, you need to go and talk to that person about that, but they're actually starting to form those own connections themselves. They're starting to do the coffees one-on-one without having to have the donut, although the donut's great and we do that as well. I think that's really what you're looking for, is the team really starting to operate as a team, not just as a group of individuals. And if you've got a distributed team, you need to be doing this all the time. But I think because so many of us have remote teams now, we all have to do it in order really just to pull people together and keep them operating collectively rather than as just a bunch of individuals.
Brian, you want to add?
I think one of the ways we've measured success and that we've seen it is that people typically get their information in times of crisis from one of the three branches of government or news or things like that, and that continues. However, as the crisis has become a prolonged crisis, I think one of the evidence and one of the elements of success is that employees and employers have a redefined relationship now, and part of that is that employees look to their company for valid sources of information about where they're safe, what they can do, what they cannot do. And that is often more accessible to them and more real to them from people they know than some other sources that they would traditionally go to. It's a different relationship, and I believe it is evidence of an improved relationship really with employees.
Yeah, and we actually use a very cool tool called Culture Amp that measures employee engagement. And so, you can actually structure and customize the questions yourself. And so, asking specifically about remote culture and internal communications and understanding of kind of business objectives. And so, we take Culture Amp every kind of 6 months. So that is for us to, comparing Culture Amp in a remote environment versus before. And so we've been able to, I think, successfully not only measure, but then continue to have an open dialogue with employees around feedback, around what are we doing well, what aren't we doing well, how can we do better. So that is a tool that has been really helpful for this measurement.
We have an audience question. The question is, what do you each envision your post-vaccine or post-pandemic workplace looking like? And are you working on a timeline? Do you have an idea of how you're going to balance the virtual versus in real life? And I'll add on to that because I work in TV, and half of our team is in the studio and the other half is still at home. So, you can't necessarily have a cup of coffee at 11 a.m. with everybody because the people in the office are still in the office. And then, drinks at 4 or 5 p.m. doesn't work because someone has a kid at home. So it gets very complicated. So to that point, I wonder how you guys are looking at it. Lisa, you're nodding.
Yeah, absolutely. We're investing a ton of time and effort into this, and I think there are a lot of different directions to go in. The direction that Atlassian is going in is really to lean into this as an opportunity, and so we're working on how can we really make the best of the opportunities that getting better at remote working offers us. And I think it offers a lot of opportunity in terms of employee kind of happiness and flexibility, but it also offers a lot of opportunities to our organization to be able to access talent everywhere as well. So for us, we're working with a notion that we call Team Anywhere, which means that we want people to be able to work pretty much from wherever they want to within some confines, and emphasize that remote working in the majority of cases, most of the time. But I think that means that we really need to think about how do we use that office space and what does the office become now? It needs to be a place where some people go because they don't have the home set up to work effectively, or they just really, really don't like it, and there are plenty of people like that. But also, how do we then focus that space on how we bring our teams together really effectively and how we create that sort of sense of connection and teamness? And there are just a bunch of things that are just so much more effectively done in person as well. So that's something that we're investing in a lot, and trying to get that hybrid approach working as effectively as we can.
My personal view is that I think many of the work environments all of us are in will take a cue from what will happen in society overall. I think there are aspects of our current environment that will stay post-pandemic to the question, whether it be scanning a barcode at a restaurant to access a menu, whether it be the real viability now of telemedicine, or things like curbside pickup, prominence in retailers. I believe those things are here to stay, and I think we all want our corporate environments to go somewhat back to where they used to be, but we've collectively, as a work society, have proven to ourselves that we can do this in a largely remote environment, leveraging technology with a fair amount of success. It varies by industry and company, of course, but I do not think we're going to be going back to where it was. I think there'll be increased human connections, but there'll be some sort of middle road position from how it's been lately to how it was before. And I think companies will take advantage of many of the new things. I mean, the whole innovation coming from necessity highly applies here.
You really like that barcode menu thing? I hate that. It takes me forever to understand what I'm looking at. Fair enough.
I did not say I liked it at all. Particularly if you don't, you're trying to find it and they have their 3 different menus on there. But I do believe it's largely going to be here to stay at many places.
Oh, yeah.
I was going to say, I think in 3 to 4 years' time, you actually won't potentially know that the pandemic ever happened when you're walking through a modern workplace, because I think that the relics will be better video technology and all the conferencing rooms. Those technologies are improving drastically. I think at least at Maven, we're a technology company, meaning we already have people working a few days remotely. So I don't think that's going to change. But, we still very much are an in-person culture. And so, I think that we're really looking at the kind of post-vaccine. I think the question was post-vaccine, post-pandemic in phases. So it's really about phase one, which is getting people safely back to the office and communicating again. And that could be, we're thinking of creative strategies around having dinners in the office at night, and having, place settings where people are going to sit next to each other like they're at a wedding, and having that catered, and really building connections that way, really investing a lot in hygiene and safety. But I think gradually over time, we will kind of start to see things return to normalcy a bit, where you won't necessarily see the pandemic effects in workplaces in 3 to 4 years, if they were already that partially remote.
So sad. I think that would be a really lost opportunity personally. I think, like, from the research that we've done, we know that the changes in flexibility around time and around place for working has led to a lot of individuals feeling a lot more kind of empowered personally, in terms of the way that they are able to combine their personal and work lives. And I would be disappointed if we weren't able to try to really build that in moving forward. I think there's a huge likelihood that you're right and that everything will go back to normal. But I think that it's an opportunity for companies to really think about changing the dynamic between employee and employer, and that notion of, how do we bring our lives together, our personal and our work lives together, and make them gel much more effectively than maybe they have in the past.
We have another question, which is actually somewhat related. How do you communicate culture to people who've been onboarded during the pandemic, and those best practices for onboarding somebody? I honestly cannot fathom switching jobs and having to learn a new job and then learn new people during this pandemic, yet I know it's happened to many, many people. Brian, you want to start on this one?
Yeah, this is something we've had a lot of challenging experience with, if you will. I mean, the reality is it is much harder to establish a cultural connection with someone that is brand new during the pandemic than it is to someone you've worked for 5 or 10 years. It's an entirely different level of challenge. And there is no, silver bullet on there other than very significant leadership, intentional effort around connecting them. And yes, you can send this, and you can do the virtual dinners, and you can do that in isolated circumstances. You can do, a socially distanced in-person thing, perhaps. But it's going to require much more intentional effort around that candidates or new talent that has come on board. There is no silver bullet, and that has been a real challenge.
Yeah, we've at Maven, we're about almost 200 people now. So we've actually hired 90 during the pandemic, and so that has been definitely challenging. I think one of the things that we're trying to move to is now there's just like a group of people that have been onboarded remotely. And so we're trying to actually build culture among them because they're having a very similar experience versus some of the people that were in the office. So that's one thing. Again, I think it comes down to being super structured in your processes, your values, this is what to read, this is what to do, here are the 10 to 20 people you should meet, and then really continue to invest in manager training and manager communication, because at the end of the day, onboarding is essentially done by a manager. And so how do we empower the managers to really step up here? But yeah, there's nothing perfect, and nothing kind of beats the in-person experiences.
Yeah, at Atlassian, we've onboarded hundreds and hundreds of people, and I would agree with everything that you're saying in terms of really trying to make sure that it's structured and thoughtful, and that all the information is there. I'd add one more thing to that, which is the research that we've done shows that there are 3 really important things that impact people's work experience during this pandemic time, and one of those is network quality. And this is where new people are really going to suffer, because they're coming into an organization where they know nobody. So one of the most important things that we can do for people as we're onboarding them is to really make sure that they're getting introduced to all of the people that they need to know in the organization. And that can be something that's not necessarily on the checklist. You might get a buddy, to sort of, or somebody to sort of partner with. But I think, really thinking about like who's the big list of people that we need to make sure that these individual is being connected to, and how can we start to foster that network that's going to help them be much more effective more quickly.
Super smart point. What do you guys do? Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to add that something consistent with what was just being discussed is, I think, one of the silver linings of this situation we've all been in, particularly for in corporate environment, is I've always believed that you need to be yourself at work, that you can't like check into work and have a different personality than you have at home, or else you're in probably the wrong career. But now people's hands are sort of forced on that. And there's this notion of authenticity at work. And I think it does relate to things like onboarding and new employee and culture, because, whether it be an entry-level analyst to a CEO, they see each other in a home environment. And of course, we all know what happens. There are dogs, there are buzzers, there are there's food being delivered or children and homeschooling and all of these things. And people see each other in a much more non-hierarchical human way. And I think that is actually a really good thing, and is one of the ways that culture can be established during this time.
I definitely had my daughter try to take off my microphone when I was in the middle of a show. That was a good one. It got a lot of retweets, though. Did you guys ever experience time zone changes among staff? This is a purely personal question because my co-anchor is in London, so it's very difficult to create social environments for the team when you're 4 to 5 hours apart. Have you guys had to manage that? Yeah, Kate, you're kind of smiling.
Yeah. Yes, we
what do you do?
had. Yeah, there's not a whole lot. I mean, it's, to be honest, one of our execs has been mostly living in Italy, and for family reasons, and he's just working crazy hours. Like, he's just basically staying on the hours of the U.S. And the East Coast. And so, yeah, it's really rough. But it's kind of like if somebody is does choose to spend some time, in a faraway time zone, they're just making it work with U.S. hours, which yeah, that's rough.
Fair, totally on his point. Brian or Leisa, you guys have to deal with that too? Brian?
No, I was saying we're probably unfairly used to that. And we have, as you know, big global company, for better or for worse. And so we have leaders on our team from everyone from Dubai to Sao Paulo to Hong Kong. So we are kind of used to that. That is not a new element. All of a sudden you do see, someone on your team or whatever you have regular calls with. It's like, I didn't know your home office was near the beach. That's interesting. But, you do see that. But it's a problem, but it's something that as a global company, we're well skilled to handle.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Brian. This is something that is, we have to deal with this with or without a pandemic. I think that one thing that it does make you do is it makes you be really thoughtful about, you almost have a communication strategy for your team. So you're thinking about, like, how do I communicate the things to the team in the most effective way so that the things that everybody really needs to be able to see is being communicated in a way that will ensure that they all see it, and that the way that we're scheduling our meetings is as kind of fair and equitable as possible, and that we're really using that meeting time for that collaboration time, for that team building time, not necessarily for sort of information transmission. So I think it is an absolute pain in the butt, absolutely. But I think it can also really help drive much more thoughtful communication in your team, which could end up being kind of a net benefit.
What do you guys do about people who are reticent to get more engaged in the activities that you guys do set up, like the karaoke thing or the breakout chats you were talking about, Leisa? How do you get them on board?
I think that, and I think we talked a little bit about this before, it's about having a real diversity. It's about trying a lot of different things and giving a lot of different ways for people to engage. So, some people might just go, really, there's some people in our team who are just absolute suckers for a good trivia game. And that's that. If somebody's doing trivia, they will 100% be there playing trivia. Other people love to get into the book and film conversation. Others of us are playing Rocket League or Among Us or whatever the kind of cool games are, learning how to play those games and playing those together. So I think there's loads of different ways that team members can engage, and the more diversity we have in those, the more likely it is that somebody will find something that appeals to them and feels kind of safe and comfortable for them to engage with. So that's what I'd be encouraging.
Yeah, and I think with us, what we've really noticed is if you're also a caregiver right now, you just don't have a ton of time for as much kind of engagement outside of the Zoom office hours. And so, we have a lot more engagement among our non-caregiver employees. And so we do try to structure all kind of fun night activities, things that they would like, and then just still make sure that we're creating within teams the space for our caregivers who are, during the working hours can do fun things, whether it's through offsites or donuts with people, but also just respecting that, like, this is also a time where some people can't engage as much, and just respecting that.
Yeah,
Another question I want to get in. Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to say there is a level of engagement fatigue sometimes, and at least in our case, we let that be where it is, and sometimes we just go old school and just ask that person how they want to be embraced during this time, because not everyone's going to want to be in the virtual dance party. We get that. And that's probably a good thing.
You definitely do not want to see some people in a virtual dance party. The other issue that has really been confronting a lot of companies is mental health and sort of keeping tabs on people that are at risk, et cetera, and especially when you can't really be near them. What do you guys do about that, Leisa?
So I think this is where our managers really come to the fore. And we want to, what we know about managers through this pandemic period is that they kind of feel sometimes at a little bit of a loss as to what their job is now and how they can be seen to be really productive. And I think this is a super important role for our managers right now. And this is about making sure that when we're having our one-on-ones with employees, with people in our teams, that we're spending plenty of time talking about the individual and how they're getting on and understanding what their circumstances are like.
Is there like a checklist that you guys have to give managers so they know that they're like hitting all the right points, or do they have their own kind of training?
So we don't have a checklist. We do have training. So our people team are providing a ton of training for our managers to really help give them the support that they need to manage people through these difficult times and understand how to handle different circumstances that might come up. So I think you have to have flexibility in how you approach it, because everybody's circumstances are just so different, and everyone's experiencing this so differently. So there has to be a lot of flexibility there. But I think really supporting managers to recognize that this is their job, and spending time on this, not just spending time on the work and the projects, is their job as well, is really important. And then similar to the culture amp, we've really upped our engagement via kind of survey mechanisms as well. So we have regular pulses that we're taking where we're giving people the opportunity to tell us how things are going on that side. And then through that, we know that there are plenty of people who are really struggling right now. And so organizationally, we've put a lot more in place to help support people through just the personal challenges of working more remotely, but also especially in the US right now, there's been a lot of kind of external things, external stresses going on as well. So offering support for like how to deal with political anxiety is something that we have to do now. And to Brian's point about really integrating the whole person into the workplace right now, taking responsibility for supporting that is something that we need to do.
So we have like 2 minutes left, but a minute and a half. But I just want to get both of your takes on the mental health situation. Brian, you want to go?
I agree with what was just said. I mean, it's not a checklist type of thing. It is absolutely a substantial training and investment in the company to make sure we do, best efforts around ensuring that and being there for people. That's a huge part of it. Another angle to that for us, at least, is to make sure that the employee understands why the work that they do is important, especially in a time like this, how it has purpose. And that, for us, has been a link is correlated to improved mental health. That's been a big part of it, too. But it's a training issue for sure.
Yeah, I would say for us, we just did a big survey with Great Place to Work. And, 96% of the companies we spoke to, about 1,200 companies, said that employee health, mental health was one of the top benefit priorities in 2021. So, I think from a top-down approach, what we're seeing, not only with our own product, but what we've personally done is invested in some of these mental health benefits. So, we have the Daylight app now with tools. We do, these meditations. We also have no meeting blocks on Wednesdays and Fridays to give people a break. So, because I think there's just a huge business case when you reduce burnout, employees are 20x more likely to stay. So this is a real retention and business issue. So I think that there are like some top, like a lot of top down, but then, echo what everyone else said on the empowering managers to really have these conversations and arming them, with the right tools to enter the conversations.